Open Grand Finals of. Okay, I guess let's start that again. Welcome to the Open Grand Finals of the Western Ivy 2025. My name is Josh Boone, my preferred pronouns are he, they. I'll be chairing you for this round. I have a lovely set of panelists judging alongside me, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves in alphabetical order, starting with Alex.
Hi guys, my name is Alex. Best of luck for the round.
Hi,
Arjun.
Diego.
Arjun, the one.
Victor, good luck, everyone.
Diego?
Yeah, Diego. Best of luck to everyone.
Okay, thank you so much. So the motion that we have for the grand finals reads as follows. This house believes that it is in the interest of humanity that the deity never returns, the deity of which is described in the context slide, inviting on the Prime Minister. Here.
Hey, am I visible and audible? Thank you. Just before I start, I don't commonly do this, but I want to thank my partner Lara for being here with me past midnight. Her speeches at this tournament were amazing. If breaking at a major at your first year of debating isn't impressive enough, I think this performance was impressive enough, at least. That being said, I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Insofar as the Infoslide clarifies and the clarifications further clarify that this debate happens within the world framework of the religions we are talking about, we think that this judgment looks like kingdom come, the rapture in Christianity, or the return of the Al-Mahdi in Islam. This means it is a final judgment. It is the end of human material existence and a final transition to the spiritual world. This is the form in which it is preached in those religions. So we do not have a continued existence of the material world past the final judgment. The second implication of the motion is that the deity is real. If the deity is not real, it cannot return, and we cannot debate whether or not this is in the interest of humanity. What also follows as a corollary is there is a deity which exists. We are unclear which deity exists and whether the one we believe in is the correct deity. Those are clarifications being made. What are the interests of humanity which are going to permeate my speech? Insofar as humanity exists and will continue to exist on both sides of the house until the potential return or lack thereof of the deity, they are one, the ability to retain agency, which is to say that you're able to act upon your own free will later. Secondly, that you're able to define your own meaning in life and therefore be in touch with what is the pursuit of happiness for you as an individual. And thirdly, that you're fairly judged for the consequence of your actions. We're going to demonstrate that the return of the deity fulfills none of these criteria. I'll take the clarification.
Yeah, we agree with everything except for the end of material existence. This is massive. If the CAs meant this, they would write this or answer your clarification with a yes, which they did not.
The CAs answered the clarification by saying that the debate happens within the world framework of these religions. You can read the clarification. I said it word by word. The word framework of these religions implies that there is a final judgment. This is also written in scripture. You're welcome to read it as well. In terms of judgment, we first of all believe that judgment is arbitrary when the deity returns. The question is, have we correctly interpreted the will of God? Because ultimately, the will of God through the holy books, through scripture and what we consider to be canon, and through the words of saints or people who wrote the hadith, for example, was written by fallible and sinful beings. This means the judgment itself is epistemologically unjust because we are being judged based on a law or a code which may have from the beginning been written wrong by people who have preceded us. This means that we're ultimately judged with no complicity. This is fundamentally unfair because we do not retain fair control over the consequences of our actions. This is especially important if there is one deity and we do not ultimately know which deity is the correct one, but even if we say that we debate this debate separately in different religions, the problem still pervades. Additionally, if this is unjust, not just because of its finality, which is to say it's irreversible, you have no right of appeal, but secondly, because we do not know what that judgment is. You cannot conceptualize the judgment. What does it mean to be raptured? Which is to say, you're unaware what the consequences exactly are, and the will of God is very often purposefully hidden from you because you're not meant to understand God. The concept of belief, as per the world framework of these religions, is that you believe and not try to understand and not try to question, which means that you act without knowledge of what the consequences of your actions will be. It is not in the interest of humanity to live in such a world, because we believe that form of world is fundamentally oppressive, because you consistently consider what is going to happen to humanity, to you, to your soul, because if you are within that religion, you believe that your soul supersedes material existence. Come the day of judgment, you're never able to access that information. Therefore, we believe that God is unjustly imposing this on humanity, and this is not in humanity's interest. But secondly, furthermore, on the concept of judgment, you are judged by your tormentor. God himself made you sinful and then punishes you for the sin you committed as per his creation, because you were programmed to be sinful, because you're not meant to be God. God is perfect as opposed to you, and this is the crucial distinction in religion, which is to say that you're punished for something that you never intended to happen, but happened as a consequence of your nature, which was created by God himself. So he's essentially punishing you for his own sin. We say again, this diminishes or even completely eliminates the agency of humanity and the fundamental right we have to be fairly judged for our actions. But thirdly, let's get a bit more practical. We're talking about religions, and again, those are the religions referred to by the CA team and the Infoslide, that are 2,000, 3,000, maybe 10,000 years old. Over time, as humanity continues to exist, and as a deity has not returned, whilst we have made so many efforts to speed up the return of the Messiah, of the Mahdi, of the Savior, people are likely to stop believing that this is true, to stop giving credence to this idea. This only happens if the deity does not return. Why do we think this is crucial? Because currently, look at the examples we have. We have shaheeds who sacrifice their lives because they believe in the concept of active messianism and that the Savior is going to come earlier if they sacrifice their lives. Evangelicals in the USA vote for pro-Israel policies, not necessarily because they believe this is going to lead to a betterment of their own material lives, but because they believe that the union of the biblical Judea and Samaria is going to speed up the second coming of Jesus Christ. This is where you lose your humanity. Why? Because you are acting in a way which never allows you to access your own definition of happiness, because it has been pre-prescribed to you. If the deity never returns, we will stop considering that there is an external source of happiness, which must be the correct source of happiness, which means we contemplate on what the source of happiness should be to us as individuals. And insofar as we exist and our lives are ultimately a combination of utility and disutility, and it is better to feel happy than to feel grievous, we feel that this is a good thing to happen. But lastly, insofar I've already taken you, insofar as this motion implies the return implies a return to morality, we don't necessarily think that's a good thing. We think that a distinction between good and evil is something positive in this world, which is to say that through the existence of things we deem evil, whether they are objectively evil or not, it's unclear as per the motion whether we can determine this. This also means that we can, by comparing to evil, define what is good and therefore define a path for ourselves that we are going to follow. This is important because through that, we achieve a sense of meaning. That meaning comes and stems from us believing that we do good. If everyone does good and follows the same path, then that meaning does not exist, because we're unable to differentiate between good and evil, and therefore also unable to say that we further the path of good as opposed to evil. But lastly, we believe it's fundamentally oppressive to not allow humanity to decide upon its own morality. If humanity has no access to God, cannot communicate with God, cannot parlay with God, then it is unfair to be judged by a law in which you had no part. Therefore, the only thing which can be in the interest of humanity in maintaining its agency is that humanity retains the right to define its own laws, because humanity can also redefine its laws. And this is the only way in which humans retain agency, in which they retain meaning. I think opening government has already won this debate.
Also, you can just resume the recording, inviting on the DPM. Okay.
Okay, let me just sort my papers. I will start in. Oh, before that, thank you so much for Tin for doing this tournament with me. I'm very grateful to be learning from you every day, and I believe that we are going to do great at Worlds. So proud to be part of Zagreb. Okay, now I'm going to start. Sorry. Okay. Is it moral and in the interest of people to kill blind children to end their suffering? This is what O is telling you, that an arbitrary figure who do not know what it wants, what metrics it abides by, that it is going to arbitrarily choose for people at what point their lives should cease to exist, and what other people who also go by arbitrary rules that is one person just like decided is true, that they are going to go into hell and have internal suffering quicker on their side. Okay, firstly, I want to go over OO and say a couple of things. Firstly, they say, oh, but now like this is the deity is only going to come at the point where apocalypse happens when people are already suffering. Notice that you're already going to suffer in the apocalypse, because by their own analysis, the world was like going through the apocalypse. That means there were multiple wars. There was hunger. That means you're already suffering at that point. It is unclear to us at what point is the deity going to decide that this is now going to cut out your life, because notice it is not going to, like, by their analysis, it's not going to preventively like make you perish from the world. It is going to make you witness all of these things and then make you perish. What is there the difference than me being killed by a meteorite and not feeling that because the impact is so like instant, that and like being washed away into with the deity, which is also like something that is going to be terribly traumatic to me, because if the end goal is that like maybe heaven exists and I go there either way, it does not matter in what kind of way I go there, if I'm teleported or if I'm crushed by a meteor. Secondly, we tell that this deity is very like unclear what it wants. That means it's very unclear at what point at what metric of apocalypse it is going to get. Maybe there's like war somewhere, but notice that some people are still not going to suffer that much. We still think that the deity still does not have the value. It does not have the right to choose when it is going to make people end their suffering. Because notice, we do not make people be killed only because they suffer from cancer. Because we would maybe be doing them solely because they are already suffering and they're in a lot of pain. But we are not making them get killed only by the metric of how we feel that they are suffering. Notice that because like people who suffer can already like find happiness in some sort of way. People who are maybe unhappy can in the long term become like more happy. That means we should not prove these arbitrary metrics on the people of the whole world, and this is not in the interest of the people, because we also do not know how the deity actually looks like. Because notice, it is not necessarily the forgiving God that Christianity talks about. Maybe it's the God from the Old Testament that thinks that women who are divorced are also sinful and that they should perish. The children born from prostitutes are also sinful and that they should perish. We tell that at a point where you're trying to cleanse the world, these people who are arbitrarily chosen, which we do not now see as sin, are going to also be much worse. Now I want to talk about our argument about the agency, which was not rebutted by OO really, because notice we think that this motion talks about the interest of humanity. What is one universal aspect that all people crave? It is to have different interests, because they have different cultures, they are of different genders, different ideas. That means our common ground is that we all want to choose a life for ourselves. That is what modern societies are built on. That is why we abolish slavery. That is why we give people education to be able to have more reach onto what they can do with their lives. That means agency is a big corporation of interest of humanity. Why agency is taken away by this deity? 3 reasons. Firstly, because notice that the deity cannot like judge you and like make you be seen as sinful if you do not know what kind of metric, on what basis you're being judged by. Because notice, texts of like religion change throughout history. Some things that were sinful in the past, such as like women wearing pants, are not sinful right now. There are also many different religions who have many different rules. That means I do not know at any point of my life if I'm doing things the right way, because the person who is judging me, they did not give me clear rules that I learned. Notice that we currently do not put people in prison because if someone gives me a gun and says it does not have a bullet, and then I shoot it to someone and it does have a bullet, I'm not going to go to jail. Why? Because I did not have all the information to be able to act according to these things. That means that people who are maybe like doing some sinful stuff because the deity thinks, that gay people are sinful and they're being gay and they do not think that it's sinful, at some point they're going to be judged that is very bad. Secondly, we tell you that you do not get a say to talk to the deity to explain your situation. For example, maybe you were poor and you sold drugs who were like laced with poison or whatever, and you kill the teen and you continue to sell the drugs because you didn't have any other income of money. At that point, in normal societies, we will have a trial, we will talk to the person, and we'll see if they can be like reformed. At the point where the deity is coming in, it is taking your basic human dignity. Thirdly, the sentences is too harsh because notice all the people who maybe did different kinds of sins perish at the same time in the same way. All people who died, people who were massacres or who did petty thefts, who were prostitutes, they all die and they get the same punishment. That means because this is not something that the normal society lies upon, because we think that people can be reformed and they should not, and that the act that they did is like too harsh of a punishment to be killed. Before I continue, closing. Opening.
What about the like 97 billion dead people? Sorry, like we bring them back to life. Isn't that really good?
Okay, I'm not now going to talk about this because notice even if CEO or whatever says that the world continues to exist after this. Firstly, people go through tremendous trauma from this. That means your loved ones literally died and perished between your eyes, or they didn't return. That means you know that they are now currently in hell, burning to the ground and feeling the internal burn from like the end of the eternity. And that also like people are now going to see them as evil. And you think that they were evil person. This is something that is going to be very harmful for you. You do not know like where they are. Secondly, how is the life on Earth for possibly going to continue existing? Because notice now dead people like came to life and now they're just like there. What do you do with them? You do not have any like working people. Like internet is probably also like down. You do not have like any crucial sectors because now your whole fabric of society was replenished because the deity wanted to cleanse the world. That means you have to come from the zero. That means at the point where the deity also like abandons you because it just like cleansed you and removed the bad people who we do not know who they are. The deity didn't give you any mechanisms as to how to build the society. That means you're also like removing the quality of life for the people that are now left in the world, and the whole chaos erupts. Because notice people at that point are going to be extremely afraid. They're going to be extremely afraid. They're just going to waste time wanting to see what the deity wants for them to do, and they're going to live in fear of not being sinful again and making the same mistakes. This is so bad for that because they lose the agency and they do not make less suffering. They just lose the agency that they have to keep. We cannot just arbitrarily kill people. So proud to propose.
We thank the DPM for that fine speech and writing on the yellow here.
Just checking audio is fine. There's a stage at early childhood where children only act in their self-interest and they don't really possess any moral understanding whatsoever. And then one day, sometime, they start to understand that there are morals. They start to understand that there are reasons why they ought not always act in their self-interest. And when that happens, you would not say that the child that had no concept of morality has died. You would say that it has improved its understanding, and in fact that it has become far more human, because even though its initial conception of morality is very simplistic and very flawed and will continue to improve over its lifetime, that is something that makes it more of a human and not less. And similarly here, when we reveal the moral code, when we cast our judgment, and when we finalize all of the outstanding questions about should these people be in hell or should they not, that raises humanity to a standard that I think makes it far more human and not less, clearly in its interests. The first thing I want to talk about in this speech is autonomy, because opening government, I think, misunderstands what the point is of autonomy. They act as though it's a benefit in itself, but it's clearly not. Like, the reason that we care about autonomy right now, and we don't think it's very good when governments are overly constrictive about it, we understand that people have different morals, because morals right now are subjective and hard to pin down. This motion would make them not subjective. We would actually just know what the code is. The second thing that we do when we think about autonomy, well, people have different standings and different traits, and we're all individuals. They have different needs as a result of that. The needs of a poor person are different to the needs of a rich person. But when we end suffering on opening opposition, then these differing needs would go away, because there would not be need. there would be no suffering that is caused by not having your needs fulfilled. So that also would disappear. And what that means, I think, is that the typical reasons that we would give to value autonomy don't apply in this debate anymore. And it is not clear why you would care about losing your autonomy if you ascend to a higher moral knowledge, if you lose your ability to suffer or the need to suffer. The second thing that I would say, though, anyway, is that it's also just not clear that you get rid of your autonomy in the first place. Like, it seems as though what happens in this world is that you ascend to some higher heavenly plane and all of the dead people get to go there too. And that's really nice. And then you have an understanding of morality and a resolution to many of the questions that torment people about what the purpose is of life. And within that kind of strange astral intellectual plane, I suppose that you still have total, like, you still have personality, you can contemplate all of these things. Maybe there are ways that you can interact with the other people. Like, this also is a form of autonomy. And I think that when you're freed from things like your base needs and the way that suffering manipulates your brain, manipulates your body, and takes away your choices, that actually on net, you would feel as though you have far more freedom and far more autonomy. So if we care about that, probably it's opening op who wins it. The second thing I want to talk about, though, is what the comparative is for opening government, because they keep acting as though, like, it's so bad. What if you get judged and maybe you go to hell? But the problem for them is that this debate presumes that God exists, and that means that they still have to deal with a comparative where also, presumably, some of the dead people are going to hell and are suffering. And what is important about the resurrection is that that brings those people out of hell because they're no longer dead and in hell. Hell is where dead people are. And if there are no dead people, there can be nobody in hell. And it casts judgment upon them. And that judgment and punishment is not likely to be getting sent back to the place where all of the dead people go. Again, noting there would no longer be any dead people. It doesn't make sense. It is more likely to be something that is temporary, something that is perhaps moral in nature, or like, I guess like it is like God telling you what you have done and judging you for what you have done. This punishment is unlikely to be something that is worse than the alternative, which is on their side, no resurrection and eternity in hell for at least some segment of the population. The same segment of the population that they are concerned would be judged unfairly by this God have already been judged unfairly in this God and are condemned to an eternity in hell. Like, we resolve that question. That's probably pretty good for those people. The second thing that I would say, though, is that aside from the kind of pragmatic suffering stuff, like, the things that Tin is describing at the end of his speech around maybe it would be practically better for people in the long run if they lost their faith and that kind of thing, again, needs to be kind of compared. Like, you have to remember that this debate presumes that God and religion is real. So just because the deity never returns doesn't mean that people naturally lose their faith. Presumably the same types of signs and instances that constructed that faith in the first place would still exist, or people would still have spiritual experiences, might still believe that religion is real. But I think the other thing that's worth noting is that this doesn't deal with any of the material in Bennett's speech, which explains that suffering is much more likely to increase in the long run rather than decrease. Even if you reduce religious conflict, there are a variety of other things that will cause suffering. Very clear in Bennett's speech, no response from opening government. So suffering on net likely to increase. Therefore, this is, again, a good thing. The last thing I'm going to deal with is the fairness point. But before I do, I'll take a point from closing.
So the belief, the idea that this individual believes that the apocalypse is currently occurring seems to place them in an extreme minority of people. Most religious people don't believe this. They just sort of go about their lives.
What individual are you talking about? Did you guys read the motion correctly? Sorry, like this is about the interests of humanity and the deity coming back. It's not like as a person we would like this to happen. Confusing. So in terms of the fairness thing, the first thing I want to say here is just that I think the reasons that are provided by opening government for why this is unfair are reasons that are relatively easy to defeat because they're pretty generic in nature. Like, they provide three. They say there's a flawed transfer and you don't understand what the code is. It's final and you can't appeal it. And you don't know what the consequences of the judgment would be. These are just things that apply to life. Like, for instance, I don't know what the consequences of my actions will be all that well. I certainly don't know what's going to happen in the future. Every day is final and every action is final because I can't go back in time and reverse it. And I don't know anything about how other people perceive me. At least I can never know it for sure, or how they judge me. And what that means is that life is equally subject to these unfairness criteria that opening government described. But it is opening opposition who, through the resurrection, free people of this unfairness, because we give people perfect transfer, They know what the code is. We make things less final because we reverse death and we give all of those dead people more scope to exercise their autonomy in the future. That's a reversal of the ultimate finality. And we give people knowledge and infinite life. So I think for those reasons, if those are the criteria of fairness, we win on those grounds. The last thing they say is that this is unfair because God made you a sinner. But I think that what is important to understand here is that life and human development, and probably the development of any civilization or aliens or whatever, probably just does consist of stages, right? And there is a point where humanity has gone through the stage of being like an ape and an animal. Then we became humans and we had moral knowledge, but it was imperfect. Over thousands of years, I think our moral knowledge now is better than it was 5,000 years ago, and OG seemed to concede this. And at some point in the future, it is reasonable to say that our moral knowledge will improve, and there will be another stage. There'll be a stage where we get to know what is happening, where we get to know God, where we get to know the code. I think it is good to allow people to advance to that stage, to have an answer to the final question, and for that reason, very proud to oppose.
We thank the DLO for that fine speech and all the opening half debaters for a fine opening half debate. Now to start off with those CUF, let's invite our member of CUF. Take care.
Hi everyone. Could I please check my audible? Excellent. Two extensions from closing government, very simply. Firstly, why we would rather an imperfect world to heaven, even assuming a significant majority of people end up going there. Secondly, why actually a pretty significant majority of people will go to hell on their side of the house, and why that's obviously bad. Firstly then, on why we prefer an imperfect world which we live in to heaven. Note that opening government observes that people in this world now no longer have a freedom over morality. But this is insufficient to explain why people have no freedom whatsoever, right? Like whether or not, the type of ability to contract identity that they try and claim people no longer have, just is not clearly tied only to morality. Presumably people can contract identity through other ways. Similarly, they don't explain why autonomy is more important than suffering. And that's why they actually fall to a bulk of the opening opposition material, but why clearly autonomy seems to be an instrumental value rather than an end in and of itself. Therefore, this extension will demonstrate that we do value freedom and that this over, utility, as well as why this deity returning necessarily does get rid of autonomy. First premise then on why deity returning gets rid of autonomy. Number one, in order to end suffering, you have to end freedom. This is because of all the free actions I can take, almost all of them will lead towards someone suffering. Like me trying to win the debate will lead towards other people being disappointed that they didn't win the debate. Me trying to purchase something means that I'm taking resources away from other people. Me trying to get ahead in life and contract identity means I'm taking spots away from other people. Hell, I just want to ask, what does this deity do now that they're on Earth, right? Do they allow governments to operate as they are? Do they still allow welfare systems like this? Do they still allow people to vote in democracies? What about voting for the wrong person? Clearly, all of the actions that we do, which give us freedom, are tied to the possibility of suffering if we do those freedoms in ways that infringe upon the rights and happiness of other people. Therefore, your ability to choose things and do things inherently comes into conflict with the material reality or the material needs of other people, therefore meaning that a world without suffering necessitates that a world without freedom, because freedom is the ability to choose suffering for yourself or other people. Why then is suffering more important and freedom more important than autonomy? We would suggest that this is because agency is a prerequisite to form identity. We are the choices we make. I become a debater by choosing to show up to this spot. I become an academic by choosing to study. We become our identities, and our identities have meaning because we choose them. And a parallel here I would like to posit is that of the utility machine. Let's say, panel, I offered each of you a chance to give up your life right now and all the suffering you are doubtlessly feeling because of the time zone. And I transported you to a machine, for example, that just gave you nothing but pure pleasure all day. No more pain, no more tiredness, no more 8 a.m. at this time zone. Clearly, individuals will get more utility from that. But would most people, if given the option, make this choice? And I actually think that Jordan gives me a great example here. She pointed out that when children grow up and learn about suffering and learn about morality and get freedom, they become more human, not less. Imagine if all of us right now could make every human being on earth a child again. Imagine if I turn you into a child or your loved ones into a child. I would have done them a harm because I would have stripped them away of their fundamental humanity, even if they might have been happier as a child. This is because we value identity above and beyond utility. Now, this is because freedom and identity give us meaning. But number two, an independent pathway to prove this outcome is that death, suffering, and absence of happiness are a prerequisite to make happiness valuable. And this is because the possibility of loss makes utility matter. It gives us meaning. What does this look like? Debate championships and debate competitions matter only because we know that we might lose. If everyone, the moment they sign up for Western Ivy, got champion means jack shit. Even if this necessitates suffering because we don't know whether we'll be champions, because we have anxiety about whether we'll be here, because we don't know whether we'll do badly, and because most of us numerically will not. Think about it. When we think of something as a default, health, for example, and we no longer feel suffering from that, we don't experience the fact that we have a normal body as a joy. We experience it as neutral. But people who have chronic pain or feel unhealthy for a week, when they come back, they feel so much happier about the health they have. Think about it. You value your relationships with your loved ones because they might have chosen otherwise. If I told you that no matter what you did to them, they would always love you, always care for you, because they were always going to do that, that devalues the relationship somehow. And that is because love only is valuable if they can choose otherwise, if they can deprive you of that love, if there is a possibility of suffering. Love is valuable because it ends one day. We value each other and the limited time we have because of the specter of death. And without death, without suffering, none of this matters. If everyone is happy, nobody is, because and everybody will happy all the time. We will never be able to experience happiness because these are only things that are valuable insofar as the negation exists somewhere in the world. Therefore, suffering is important for value. Heaven is hell, a world where we live together with God and have no freedom, no autonomy, and only experience utility is a hell that opening opposition traps all of people in. But the last thing I want to note is status quo bias. People value their lives now, our jobs, our loved ones. Think about it. Even if you believe that your grandmother will definitely go into heaven and you're a staunch Christian, you would still pay for her cancer treatment and would never say something like, never mind grandma, let's go to heaven right now. This is because we have status quo bias towards the world and relationships of people we have now. Therefore, even if we believe a better place is out there, we don't want them to go there. Opening opposition now.
Every time you exercise your autonomy, you deprive somebody else of theirs because you take things from them or you emit CO2 or you do other harms. Why is it good to have yourself
I absolutely agree. We'd rather have people have autonomy and autonomy to infringe upon other people's autonomy rather than nobody having autonomy at all because everyone is always doing the perfect thing and nothing has meaning at all. Second argument, therefore, in this speech, why is most people going to hell? And I want to observe that opening opposition asserts that people are currently in hell now and because they are dead. But note that this is unlikely to be the case. Number one, the Infoslide says that judgment occurs after the purgatory period. This means then that it makes no fuck sense for you not to be judged, go to hell, come back, and then be judged, right? That makes no sense. Number two, logically, why judge you again? There's nothing you've been doing since going to hell that will make your judgment different. So why would God do that? Therefore, it is opposition bench that creates the judgment because previously people were non-existent, so what atheists believe, or just in a waiting room, presumably. But presumably, the majority of these people will go to hell. And I just think opening government is quite uncharitable here, right? The actual reason why is that most people come from diverse religions. Almost 97 million people, very few of them existed in one religion. And all religions, or almost all religions, preach that people from other religions will go to hell because that's how religions get you to subscribe to them and get forgiveness and all that. This means by the lottery of the fact that you're not born into a particular religion, most people, the interests of humanity, are not to go to hell. To be clear, hell is infinitely worse than purgatory. It is devils pulling out your toenails. It is burning the lake of fire. If we give people nothing on neutrality or even just blissful ignorance and sleep over hell, there's clearly a massive win for our side. Thank you.
Do you want me to wait a second?
We thank the member of God for that fine speech and writing on the member of Op here.
Cool. As a wise member of panel once said, debating is more fun when I see people's faces. If you could turn your cameras on, that would be great. Except you, Arjun. Cool. So I'll begin in 3, 2, 1. We're going to explain one thing, that a return to godly morality and judgment according to godly morality would be good because God is moral. This is what the rest of the debate circles around, but doesn't sufficiently touch. I'm going to start by directly flipping everything that PM says on agency. I want you to know that OO's answer is insufficient. They just say that if the rapture occurred, people would no longer value autonomy. That loses to OG because it misunderstands OG and doesn't answer them. OG explains that the judgment is arbitrary because until this point, you had no informed autonomy of how to act. That's what I'm going to flip. First thing Tin says, no complicity. You don't know the rules, you have no control of the consequences of your actions, and you're unaware of them, you have no knowledge, and that's oppressive. Is it not good to be oppressed by the Lord Almighty? 86% of humanity believes so. Tin presupposes human consent-based morality, that is what is in the interest of humanity. But if a deity exists who created us, they could know better than us that we are better off in this afterlife than we could know. Secondly, Tin says you are judged by your tormentor. You are programmed to be sinful. No, we are programmed to be free. And Tin himself argues in Mech 1 for the importance of freedom and consent-based morality. So you actually get punished fairly for your choices. The deity puts us in slums that breed both gangsters and saints because the same hot water that boils the egg softens the potato, and God frees us to act out those sins, but it doesn't mean that God doesn't also to give us moral proclivities to compete against those base desires. Finally, Ten says practically, but people did bad things when they try to get a deity to return. Yeah, but we try to bring back God regardless. That's not what changes in this debate. This debate is just about the return itself. In fact, let's flip this. This is a harm that only accrues until God returns and the rapture occurs, so we end this harm quicker. Let's explain now positively why God is moral. Note, OO say suffering ends. The motion gives them that. Sure, yes, Cap agrees. They say suffering is bad, with zero explanation of why. They say people are burning in hell, which they're not, as CG correctly point out. And why is death suffering? Why is existence pleasure? I don't actually, or most importantly, why is this good? Why do I care about utilitarianism? CG say suffering is good, with counterintuitions. I don't think most people are utilitarian or disutilitarian. I do think they have internal moral principles that God likely corresponds with. I'm going to now give you 4 mechs about why the morality of this God is likely similar to the morality that most people would agree with. Number 1, God likely shares our most basic moral intuitions. He created us with our moral proclivities. He likely is going to reserve extreme punishments for wicked souls and wicked sins that go sharply against this. He created our desires to tempt us, sure, but he gave us the knowledge that murder and rape and inflicting violence on others is wrong. The knowledge that treating others as we ourselves would never want to be treated is wrong. Note, this intuition is what Rabbi Akiva calls the entire Torah on one foot and what is taught to every single Jew. Okay? This knowledge is Confucius's golden rule. This knowledge is what every single one of Jesus's most well-known. You can Google Confucius's golden rule, Victor. He says you must treat others. Confucius's golden rule. Okay, it's all of Jesus's most well-known teachings. This flips OG's claim on not knowing. You know exactly how you want to be treated. You know when you're treating others as you don't want to. When you abuse your arbitrary power, your strength as a big, strong man, your power as a kingly lord, you know you are doing something wrong. Second reason why this morality is good. This deity is likely the source for several religions, meaning we should seek the things that are in common to them. I.e., Catholicism may excuse any sin so long as you say, I accept Jesus in your croaking last breath. That doesn't mean that this deity, who's the ultimate source of morality, accepts you murdering and raping children for your entire life and then saying, I accept Jesus before you die. We don't know the specifics about the actual views of this deity. He didn't write the specific books. They were written by men, but all of them likely had visions of this deity, likely perceived true miracles and some versions of the truth. So the things that these religions have in common are things we agree on. That wrath is a sin, that lust and rape is a sin, that greed is too, and we know it. Violent lords know that their wrath is a sin. Polluting tycoons know that their exploitative greed is sinful. And we all agree that they're sins. That's why they're these universal sins. So not only do we know them, it also means we agree that the people who benefit from these should be punished and the people who suffer from these should be rewarded. Third reason for why this is the correct morality. The deity likely prioritizes the primary sins. He does not true. There is one verse in the Bible that says, don't do unto a man what should be done unto a woman. But you also cannot light a fire on the Sabbath. In 2 verses, not 1. You cannot eat milk with beef. There are countless verses, 613 commandments that you must follow in the original, in the Old Testament. But there are only 10 commandments. All religions teach that there is some more important important sins that there are smaller sins that you can atone for with good deeds, with good intent, that you can outweigh them with good actions and with compassion, and that the types of sins that deem you unworthy of God's love and compassion are those severe ones. So why did religion still like burn gay people? Because persecution found an excuse in religion, right? The church stoned gay men, but Jesus said, like, he was innocent, throw the first stone. Like, people are fearful of minorities, so they like burn witches, but like Jesus loved women who were strong and powerful, like Mary Magdalene. God created gay men without the choice to not be gay. Like, why would he create that child with the intent of that child to suffer and be sinful? Whatever God may be, he is not arbitrary. Before I get into my fourth and last reason here, Tin.
Jesus loved Mary Magdalene. His father purged the city of Gomorrah. What do we do when the deity himself disagrees with himself?
As I told you, I don't think that it's likely that every single thing that happened in the Bible existed. The Jews adopted this theory of the rapture from the Zoroastrianisms after the fall of the Second Temple. They adopted it from ancient Akkadian myths. This is common across all of ancient Semitic myths because people are always looking for like what happens next, and what happens next has to be like, right, I get like justice and I get to live forever. Final reason, this deity is the absolute source of morality, so he's inherently good. He created us so he knows better than we ever could what is in our best interests. Disagreeing with him is like being a child who can't even begin to comprehend how much more their parent knows about the world than they do. Implications of this. Number one, the people who will be punished are deserving of this punishment. We are not punishing innocents for things outside of their control or for victimless crimes or things that they did not know. Number two, the world which will exist afterwards will be a good one for humans. We co-opt OO because they say end of suffering. I already explained when I was positioning this extension why that doesn't matter, and CG are going to explain more why they beat them on that. We give you the actual question in this debate is not whether in the afterlife there is or isn't suffering. It's about whether it is in humans' interest to enter God's afterlife, whether God is moral in such a way that corresponds with humans' interests, and since he created those interests, the answer is yes. Go with closing opposition.
We thank the member of OP for that fine speech, inviting on the government web speaker here.
Unmuted.
Oh, yes, you can. Just give me a moment. In the Garden of Eden, man still chose sin. The absence of suffering itself is a kind of suffering, and CG posits that it is akin to suicide. The other bench in this debate has essentially argued that a world without suffering is one that is preferable. We fundamentally prove one thing. The absence of suffering does not equal happiness or fulfillment, but rather is the antithesis of it. This extension is different from what our opening posits, because our opening suggests a lack of free will means people need choice to be able to contemplate meaning. But this is obviously susceptible to responses from Op Bench, where they go that suffering decreases people's ability to access choice, or unfairness means that people lack agency. Our framing here is therefore crucial. We say that suffering is valuable, not because it is contemplative, but because it provides a comparative function from which we are able to access those things. Our benefits were never predicated on the absence of suffering, but rather the existence of it. I'm going to do three things in my speech. First, responses to CO, then explaining why an imperfect world is still one that is better than heaven, and why this strips meaning, especially from religion. First, responses to CO. CO posits that God will judge people fairly, but I have 3 points of response. The first is that clarifications caps it. The debate occurs within the framework of world religion, and if you look at world religion right now, no religion agrees with any other world religion. So for instance, they disagree on fundamental things like whether or not disbelievers or people who are not adherents to that religion are fundamentally moral individuals. Oftentimes, these religions condemn them as infidels who deserve to burn in hell by virtue of the fact that they were misled by false gods, things that oftentimes lead to eternal punishment. My second point of response is that CO just doesn't fundamentally prove this. CO says that insofar as God created man, God had a reason for creating man, but this does not explain why that sense of morality is something that adheres with what we would consider to be moral. The idea of objective morality is something that is fundamentally antithetical because morality evolves via conversation and contemplation, which means they can't fiat that God is a moral agent, just that God will impose their view of morality upon everyone. This is the reasons why they can't suggest that to be the case. And the last part they say is that, well, if God was moral, then God would have good reasons for doing the things that they fundamentally do. But oftentimes, even if, say, for instance, God made people like gay or women or whatever, or suffer other ailments that are deemed to be sinful, God does that because God wants those people to resist sin or to resist temptation. He creates those people because of a test in and of itself, as opposed to acceptance per se. But even if you don't believe anything I'm saying, you also cannot believe anything that CO is saying. And in a world where we don't necessarily know which one is right, we think we fundamentally ought err on the side of caution, and we would rather him not fundamentally appear at all. Now, I know a response that might exist in this debate is, well, if this God is real, then he is going to judge you eventually, i.e. when you fundamentally die. But the delta in the debate, therefore, is in terms of what happens subsequently, which is why Ian's extension matters, insofar as he explains that the real comparative in this debate is why we would still prefer to live in an imperfect world as opposed to one that was heaven per se. The intuition pump here is simple. Even if we look at the world's most advanced capitalist economies, where people have material welfare, they have perfect agency, they have justice systems that protect them, oftentimes these societies are the ones with the highest rates of mental illnesses, of suicide and depression, because the absence of suffering doesn't necessarily allow people to create meaning, because it is predetermined by state systems, for instance, which pushes you towards capitalism. Now, I know the response here is, well, it's what I mentioned in my preamble, right? Like the op response, which is that suffering decreases your ability to access meaning or choice per se. But we didn't explain, like, suffering isn't absolute and suffering isn't continual, right? There are different variations in the types of suffering that people entail. What we determine to be suffering does not actually strip people of full and perfect ability to find some form of happiness from it. So, for instance, even if you are poor, you might find value in the human relationships you're able to form, the love and the bonds that you have for one another, choosing to have faith in another person, even if you don't feel they will be moral or will always make the best decisions. You're able to do things like, say, for instance, have children, even if the rest of your life isn't necessarily good, which allows you to create meaning via extending your legacy. People can find fulfillment in work, in honest work. People find fulfillment in things like choosing to be moral each and every single day, because even if the world is terrible, they derive value in knowing that they can be good in spite of it. This was, in fact, the original promise that religion offered individuals, the fact that you had to choose to believe in the face of punishment, that there wasn't some form of eternal absolute morality, but that you had to fight for your morality. You had to fight to be better and to fight to make the world better. And the fact that badness exists, that some people do genocide, some people do evil, just provides value to that meaning and morality in and of itself. The devil is the reason why people believe in God. And in a world where you know this and people move to an eternal heaven of morality, which consequently perhaps means like believing in God, knowing that God is real, so on and so forth, conclusively, it strips religion of its ability to have faith, therefore decreasing the value of it overall. Before I move on to my second point, I will take OO.
You will have even more autonomy to live and learn and love. Genocide does not provide meaning.
You don't have autonomy on your side of the house. Let's examine the comparative that OO provides. OO says you can form relationships with people. You can do things like challenge yourself, and you can do things like contemplate. I will respond to these three things in turn. Sure, you can form relationships with people, but these things oftentimes don't have meaning. People are valuable because of the fact that they might die. People are valuable because of the fact that they might leave. That you treat people in ways that are good is valuable because you choose to do so. You choose to sacrifice. You choose to compromise. You choose to be a better person. In the absence of that, where we're all nice to one another because we're programmed to be nice to one another, is a world in where those relationships don't fundamentally have meaning. They say you can challenge yourself and you can contemplate, but what is that to contemplate? The fundamental existential question of humanity is, who are we and what should we become? In a world where this is decided and all outcomes are certain, what do you study? There is no outcome. Everything that is to be known is known, and you knowing more things doesn't change the world for good or for bad, which is fundamentally a bad outcome in and of itself. The end outcome in the debate, therefore, is that our bench has no comparative as to how people provide meaning. They give you a very intuitively compelling argument, which is that if we did not suffer, we would be happy. But the absence of suffering is a different kind of suffering, one that is fundamentally irreversible. This is where I go into Ian's second extension, where Ian fundamentally explains to you why most people are likely going to be able to go to hell as a result. I don't know why the comparative on our bench is one of redemption. A lot of sins that people commit are oftentimes things that are irreversible. Even if you redeem them, we don't think people should necessarily burn to suffer from this. And while this may happen in the eventuality of things on their side of the house, their side sidesteps it. It punishes punishes those people now, it circumscribes their agency, their ability to perhaps gain redemption in terms of their life. These are all things that are bad. At the end of the day, GovBench thus far has talked about what happens before, and OpBench talks about after. We are the only team to explain why we would rather a world with suffering, even if we could choose Eden.
We thank the GovWeb speaker for that fine speech, inviting the OpWeb speaker to conclude the debate here.
POIs in the chat, please. On the top of my speech, I want to position our extension by explaining both how it beats opening opposition and then how it responds to opening government. So the issue with opening opposition is that they do not meet the crucial burden, which is the idea that some form of punishment will happen to people, and then answering the questions as to why would God choose well, and why is it fair to implement this punishment insofar people do not have knowledge. Opening opposition in this debate runs from this burden that some people will suffer, and it's unclear why from them why this would be evil people and not, as opening government claims, women who are divorced or gay people as per their analysis. What opening opposition tries to do here is just assert things. For example, that people get out of hell, that there is a chance to redeem yourself, that now you have access to more information. It is unclear as to why people do not just continue burning in hell or go through gruesome punishment as opening government claims. And I think this is how Ayal resolves this deadlock. I think he explains to you two things. The first one is that people have access to knowledge. The second one is that people who do get judged are people who do deserve to get judged. He gives you a lot of reasons as to why people have access to knowledge. The first one is that by explaining that the average person, no matter which religion they belong to, which surpasses the point about arbitrarity, has access to baseline morality needed for salvation. No matter which religion you belong to, you believe that murder is bad. No matter which religion you belong to, you believe you have to be good towards your neighbor. We believe that other points of religion are like contextual, like depending on where the religion was developed, and they're less important to the God. Thirdly, he also explains to you that that all of these things, which are like the morality we are born with, the like similarities between religion and the way in which religion has developed, shows that people do have access to morality, and people who disobey this morality deserve to be punished. People that killed with no reason, people that rape, people that are so greedy that their workers die from exhaustion in fields for their profits, all of these people deserve to be judged, and we are fine with them being judged. And this analysis then shows you how people both have access to knowledge and why baseline morality behind religion is good, which responds both to opening government's idea about why this is unfair and why this is arbitrary, but also be opening opposition which just tries to avoid this. The second thing I want to do, and this is in my opinion better, is explaining why the idea that suffering and existence of bad is what allows us to form meaning is an extremely privileged idea that people have. Because if you listen to opposing government, they tell you you're so glad that you can be moral in a world filled with evil, unless you're a person that has to steal to feed themselves, and then all of a sudden you're not. I think this is just debate lies, that suffering leads to meaning. Because note, the fact that suffering exists in other countries in the world, making it easier for me to enjoy my life as a privileged person, is not a positive thing. The people that get to contemplate how happy they are because they're not suffering are those that are, as a matter of fact, not suffering. Me being happy about my life because I'm not a child starving in Yemen doesn't mean that those children starving in Yemen are okay with being instrumentalized for me to be happy. So people that get to gloat about how they are moral in a bad world and how their life is actually not that bad are the people who do not have it worse. Secondly, know that even if people do not get to feel grateful about the absence of suffering in direct contemplation and comparison, the absence of suffering itself is a net benefit. Even if people cannot comprehend how happy they should be because they're well fed and they never went hungry, it does not mean that it is logical to conclude that it is in the interest of people who do not feel hunger. If you have two worlds, one is in which people are not happy because they are fed, and the other one is in which people feel the hunger in their stomach. They feel, as Shomi would say, the pain in their belly. We believe that the one in which people are maybe not the happiest but never felt pain is better. But thirdly, good benefits can be good even without bad things existing. You hearing something funny makes you laugh and produces dopamine, even if you have not heard 10 boring things before. You hugging a person releases happiness hormones, even if there are no other bad things happening which you can compare this to. it releases even if you hug them every single day. You eating a good meal is good sensory, which again makes you happy, and this exists on both sides of the house, and this is the meaning of life, just enjoying the good things that exist around you. I believe that the point that debate constantly brings, which is there has to be suffering in order for some people to feel good, is literally instrumentalization of people that are actually suffering. I don't think these people ever unlock meaning, and this is the third thing I want to talk about: how interest of humanity to retain agency and pursuit of happiness are unachievable. And this is, again, for the majority of people, something that they never unlock. Why? Because majority of people that died and are dying currently are dying horrible deaths. They died as infants, suffering horrible deaths. They died burned at stakes, bleeding out on walls of cities, freezing to death in their homes. Even in countries which are developed, and even with the development of humanity, people themselves are slaves to capital. They have little to no recourse over their government. They work their slave jobs aged 18 to 80, and they die in pain. They live in debt, unable to migrate, afford healthcare, afford education, afford food and information that allows them to have any form of agency. And note that people that can achieve some form of agency are people who are already privileged and live nice lives. We believe that for those people, like, having agency, and the difference between not having agency but not experiencing suffering is not like it's not that huge of a delta. Well, the delta on this side is people who are currently suffering and have no form of agency, experiencing not suffering, which is significantly more. If you're a child in Chad who is currently literally being kidnapped to fight the war in Sudan, we believe that you don't have agency and you're not suffering is more important than me, who is like a privileged person living in Europe, having multiple choices, having those multiple choices. Before going on, I'll take opening.
With the return of the deity, all people, including those who found meaning despite or even through suffering and deeply desire to live as humans, are arbitrarily killed, which means the return of the deity punishes equally by death those who did not wish nor deserve to be punished. How is this just or in the interest of humanity?
No, you're not punished by death. You're literally not punished by death because dead people are resurrected. You just live an eternal life where there is no suffering and there is return to morality. I don't believe, and I believe that the majority of people are aware that they are going to die at one point, and the majority of people like to believe in heaven and the good things that are going to happen to them. So, like, with the revealed preferences of today's world, we fulfill this metric. But secondly, how does closing opposition then fulfill this metric of people having access to agency? We believe, firstly, the way in which this return of God works is you're in a state of peace and bliss, and this is what majority of texts say. Your wishes are fulfilled. There is no material conditions which are burdening you. Secondly, this means if people seek agency to unlock happiness, you not experiencing suffering and experiencing happiness because all the things existing around you are good things is literally the pinnacle of fulfillment of this metric. But thirdly, when you think of reasons why people go out and vote, why people lead wars, why people sacrifice themselves, this is to be safe, to have peace, to be happy, to not starve. This is how we lose agency. By default, this motion allows you to go that. This means that even if people, for example, see the apocalypse, and even if they see horrible things, what opening government tells you they're going to be forever tormented is not true by the default of the motion. Yes, maybe agency is good, but agency is only the means to proceed to get what God gives you by default on side closing opposition. For this reason, seal.